You know that feeling when you're starting something new and your chest is full of hope and fear at the same time? That trembling excitement that maybe, just maybe, this time things will finally be different? That was exactly how I felt on my first day working at the hospital. I had just been hired as a nurse after months of applying, training, waiting. I wore my white uniform like armor, trying to cover the doubt that kept whispering in my ear. Will you be enough this time, Hana? My name is Hana. I'm 30 years old. Quiet, careful, invisible most of the time. I'm the kind of person who arrives early and stays late, who memorizes people's coffee orders before they learn my name. I've never been someone who stands out. I don't know how to take up space, but I care. I care deeply. And this new job at this hospital, it felt like a chance to finally matter. I had always wanted to work in healthcare. There was something about helping people in their most vulnerable moments that felt meaningful, healing not just bodies, but offering presence. Quiet understanding. So when I got the call saying I'd been accepted at the Seoul Medical Center, I cried. I cried alone in my room, my hands over my mouth, because I didn't want anyone to hear me break. And yet that excitement quickly gave way to reality. Because from the very first day, my supervisor, Chief Nurse Soojin, made it painfully clear she didn't like me. Soojin was respected, feared even. She had a sharp voice, quick steps, eyes that scanned the floor like searchlights. Everyone around her straightened their backs when she entered a room. Her uniform was always perfectly pressed, her hair pulled back so tightly it looked like it never moved. She didn't smile much, but people respected her, even admired her. And I made the mistake of thinking I could earn that too. On the first day, she called my name during rounds, and I answered with a slight bow. Yes, ma'am. She didn't look at me, just raised an eyebrow and said, "You speak too softly. Speak up next time." My face burned. Over the next few days, it didn't get better. Every small thing I did was questioned. If I handed her a chart, she'd double-check it immediately, as if I were always wrong. If I restocked supplies, she'd redo them in front of me. Once, when I helped a patient back into bed, she muttered, "Clumsy." I hadn't even touched anything wrong, but I apologized anyway. And yet I kept going. Every day I woke up early, arrived before my shift, stayed after to organize supplies, smiled at patients even when my heart felt heavy, and still nothing changed. Soojin's voice cut sharper each day. I began to dread seeing her name on the schedule. I'd go home at night and lie awake, replaying every word she said to me. "Too slow. You forgot to record this. Why are you standing there?" I'd whisper to myself, "You're trying. You're doing your best." But the voice inside me would answer back, "Maybe your best just isn't good enough." It wasn't that she was cruel. She never shouted, never insulted me directly. But her tone, the cold way she addressed me, made me feel like I didn't belong, like I was always one breath away from failing. The other nurses noticed. One of them, Minha, would sometimes whisper encouragement to me in the break room. "Don't take it personally. She's always like that with the new ones." Another said, "Just survive the first 3 months. If you don't quit by then, she starts tolerating you." But I didn't want to be tolerated. I wanted to be trusted. I wanted to matter. One afternoon, I was assigned to assist in the pediatric wing. A small boy, maybe 5 years old, was crying nonstop. His parents weren't there. He was scared. I sat next to him, gave him my hand, and just stayed. Didn't speak. Didn't rush. I stayed until his sobs slowed, until he let go of the sheets and held my fingers instead. Later that day, Soojin saw me sitting with him. She didn't say anything, just walked by, expression unreadable. The next day, I overheard her telling another nurse, "Don't get too attached to patients. We're not their mothers." It stung, but I kept going. Because even if she didn't see my worth, I wanted to believe it was still there. Some nights I cried in the locker room, waiting for everyone else to leave. Other times I'd write in my little notebook, the one I kept in my locker. Day 19, still invisible. Still trying, still here. That became my silent mantra. Still here. And yet, there was something about her, Soojin, that I didn't understand. She wasn't just harsh. She seemed tired. Her eyes had shadows. Her voice, though sharp, sometimes trembled at the end of a shift. I began to wonder what pain she carried. What had hardened her like this? One evening, close to the end of my shift, I passed by the staff hallway and heard voices. Soojin and one of the doctors were arguing, quietly, but intensely. "She's not ready for trauma care," the doctor said. "She's more reliable than half the staff," Soojin replied. They were talking about another nurse, but what caught me off guard wasn't the topic. It was her voice, the way she defended someone, with passion, with belief, so she could care. She did believe in people, just not in me. Not yet, and I didn't know if she ever would. But something inside me whispered, "Stay, wait, watch. Keep showing up." So I did, and everything was about to change. The hospital was always a place of constant noise. Monitors beeping, stretchers rolling, voices over intercoms, the buzz of fluorescent lights. But there were moments, brief, almost hidden, when everything seemed to slow down, like time was holding its breath. I'd begun to notice those moments, and I wondered if they were trying to tell me something. It had been almost 2 months since I started working there, and nothing had changed between me and Soojin. She still called me too soft, too slow, too hesitant, still watched over my shoulder, still made me feel like I was always 2 mistakes away from being replaced. But something had shifted in me. I wasn't trying to impress her anymore. I wasn't trying to win her approval like a child waiting for praise. I had stopped writing "still invisible" in my notebook. Now I wrote "present, capable, learning. I started reminding myself every morning before work, you don't need to be perfect, just honest, just present. One afternoon, during a particularly long shift, I was sent to cover in the ER for a few hours. It was intense, chaotic. A teenager had come in with a deep wound on his arm, and while I wasn't the lead nurse, I ended up holding pressure, talking to the boy, keeping him calm until the bleeding was under control. It was messy, stressful, but I handled it. When Soojin passed by later and saw me cleaning the supplies, she paused for a second, just a second, and said, "That was well done." It was so quick I almost didn't believe I heard it, but I had. It was the first time she acknowledged anything I did in a positive way. My heart didn't know how to react. I nodded, barely whispering, "Thank you," but she had already walked away. Still, something in my chest stayed warm for the rest of the day. That small shift, that fragile moment made everything feel different. Not easier, but different. I started noticing things about her too. The way her voice softened when she spoke to elderly patients. The quiet sigh she let out after every 12-hour shift. The fact that her locker had a tiny photo of a young girl, tucked in the corner, maybe a niece, maybe a daughter. I didn't ask. And then came the day everything truly changed. It was late, a weekend shift. Most of the hospital was quiet, low staff. Some people had already signed out early. I was finishing chart updates near the nurse's station when I saw Soojin walking briskly down the hallway. At first, I thought she was just in a hurry, but something was off. Her steps weren't steady. Her shoulders seemed tense, more than usual. And then, right in front of the medication room, she stopped suddenly and leaned against the wall. Her hand went to her chest. That's when I knew. I rushed to her side. "Soojin, are you okay?" She shook her head. I think I'm having... Her words trailed off. She was pale, sweating, breathing hard. I helped her sit down on the floor slowly, kept my voice calm. "Don't talk, just breathe. I'm going to check your pulse." Her heartbeat was irregular. I pressed the emergency call button on the wall, but I already knew that wing was nearly empty. The ER nurse had stepped out. The attending physician was still in surgery. There was no one immediately nearby, just me and her. "Soojin," I said gently, kneeling beside her, "you're going to be okay. I need you to trust me just for a few minutes." Her eyes were full of panic, but she nodded. I ran a quick check. Blood pressure, vitals. I remembered my training. I remembered the late-night study sessions. I remembered the voice of my instructor saying, "In a crisis, your calm is more important than your speed." I administered oxygen, stayed by her side, kept her alert, kept her breathing steady. I talked her through it, every step. I told her what I was doing. I never raised my voice. I never left her side. When the doctor finally arrived, I gave a clear, focused report. He nodded, impressed. They took her to a resting room for observation. It wasn't a heart attack, but it had been close. Severe arrhythmia triggered by stress, fatigue, and dehydration. After everything calmed down, the doctor came to me. "She's stable now. You did exactly what needed to be done. Thank you, Nurse Hana." I nodded, but I couldn't stop shaking. I sat alone in the break room afterward. My hands were trembling. The weight of what had just happened crashed over me. I had been calm when it mattered. Present, capable. But now I cried, quietly, my body processing what my mind had just carried. The next morning, I didn't expect to see her, but there she was. Soojin came in early. Her posture was straight as ever, hair tied back, uniform crisp, but something in her eyes was different. She approached me at the nurse's station. I stood up, nervous. "Hana," she said, "can we talk?" We went into the break room. She sat. I sat. For the first time since I had met her, she looked uncertain. "I owe you an apology," she began. "I haven't treated you fairly. Not since day one." I didn't know what to say. I just looked at her. "I was hard on you," she continued. "Too hard. I thought I was being protective of the team. I thought I had to test you. But the truth is, I see a lot of myself in you. Quiet, reserved, always watching. And I think maybe I didn't like that." She paused. "But yesterday, you were everything a nurse should be. You stayed calm. You did exactly what needed to be done. And you saved me." She looked down for a moment, then added, "Thank you, Hana. Truly." Something in me softened. I didn't need an apology. I didn't expect one. But hearing her say that and hearing her finally see me, it felt like something inside me opened for the first time in years. "I was just doing my job," I whispered. She smiled, a small, real smile. "And you're very, very good at it." That day, everything changed. She didn't suddenly become warm and chatty. That wasn't her, but she started trusting me, including me, listening. Sometimes we shared tea in the break room in quiet silence. And that was enough. What changed wasn't just between me and her. It was in me. I started walking taller, trusting more, believing that even quiet people can carry strength. And that sometimes the person you think sees the least in you just hasn't learned how to look yet. After that day, everything changed. Not in a dramatic movie-like way. There was no slow-motion moment where people clapped or hugged or told me I had saved the day. The hospital went back to its usual rhythm. Patients came in, charts piled up, machines beeped. But something quiet and real had shifted between me and Soojin and inside myself. She never spoke about what happened in detail again. She didn't like being the center of attention. But from that day forward, I noticed little things. She started greeting me in the mornings, started trusting me with more responsibilities. When decisions had to be made quickly, she called my name first. And I responded it with confidence I didn't know I had. One afternoon, she handed me a schedule and asked if I'd be willing to help. Train 2 new interns. I froze for a second. Train someone? Me? You're calm under pressure, she said simply. They'll learn from you. I nodded, speechless. And I did. I trained them, showed them around, answered their questions, even the nervous, repetitive ones. I found myself using phrases Soojin once used with me, only softer, more patient. I started to understand what it meant to grow. One evening, I was reorganizing supplies when Soojin walked in. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed but not cold, just observant. I've been meaning to ask, she said. Why did you become a nurse? I looked up surprised. She had never asked me anything personal before. I hesitated, then replied softly, because I know what it's like to feel small, invisible. And I thought, maybe I could be the kind of person I once needed. She nodded slowly, and then after a long pause said, you are. It was such a simple sentence, but something in me cracked open, not in pain, but in healing. I went home that night and opened my old notebook, the one where I used to write, still invisible. I'm here, I matter, I am seen. That moment became a turning point, not just in my job, but in how I carried myself. I stopped apologizing before every sentence. I began trusting my own instincts. And slowly I noticed that others began to trust me too. I still wasn't the loudest person in the room. I didn't suddenly become charismatic or bold, but I no longer needed to shrink. And Soojin, she didn't change completely either. She was still precise, still had that commanding presence, but I could see now what lived underneath it, the weight of responsibility, the walls she built to protect herself from the emotional storms of the job. And beneath that, someone who cared deeply, someone who had once been like me. We never became close friends. That wasn't the nature of our bond, but we became something more valuable. Allies, colleagues, two women who understood each other without needing to explain everything. One day, months later, I was helping a patient's family fill out discharge papers. Soojin passed by and quietly slipped a note onto my clipboard. I didn't open it right away. When I finally did, it read, "The best nurses aren't the loudest. They're the ones who stay steady when everyone else falls apart. Thank you for being steady, Soojin." I kept that note. It's still in my locker, tucked between 2 pages of my notebook. And sometimes when I have a hard day, when I question whether I'm enough, I read it again. Not because I need validation, but because it reminds me of who I've become. I didn't need to shout to be strong. I didn't need to be bold to be brave. I just needed to be present, steady, honest. Sometimes the people who seem the coldest are just waiting for someone to see them too. And sometimes the people who feel the smallest carry the kind of strength the world forgets to recognize. I'm still Hana, still quiet, still sensitive, still more comfortable listening than speaking. But now I know that doesn't make me less. It makes me exactly who I need to be. And for the first time in my life, that feels like enough. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's a new story waiting for you every week.